Alright guys, and welcome back to the Saints VD channel for something content, whether you're watching on YouTube or you are listening on your preferred audio platform. Hopefully, if it's all worked out, I will have this on Spotify, iTunes, etc., whatever platform you get your podcast from. But today we're going to be reviewing the season that has just finished. Over 350 days long. It's been a long one, let's be honest. But I've got Tom with me to sort of break down the season. We did it last year. Tom, mate, to start us off, how are you doing?
Yeah, really good. Yeah, obviously, been a weird season, hasn't it? Like I say, 350 days. No one expected it at the start, but yeah, glad to have got it done and glad to end on a high, I think.
Yeah, no, definitely. Well, let's start off with the very beginning. It seems so long ago now, but technically it was this season, last July, the transfer window. I remember us filming our season preview, and we said we'd had a good transfer window. We got Moussa Djenepo and Shea Adams in early for 14 and 15 million pounds respectively. Obviously, Danny Ings became a permanent player, but we knew that was going to happen. So within literally the first couple of weeks of the transfer window, we'd spent almost 50 million pounds. Were you excited about these new options going forward?
With Shea Adams, I was, but I wasn't really sure about Djenepo. I didn't really know anything about him, but Adams I'd watched a bit in the Championship, so I knew he always could make a step up. But Djenepo was sort of, I know you lads knew a bit about him, but I didn't know anything about him. So those two moves we needed attacking options, didn't we? So I think they were definitely two good options at the time.
Yeah, no, 100%. And then obviously Danzo came in on loan from Augsburg, which obviously gave us an option at the back, but in the end it wasn't really worthwhile. But the other thing I was looking at when I was sort of looking at our transfer window was our transfers out. I mean, you've got a couple we got fees for. Obviously, we got 14 odd million for Matt Targett from Aston Villa, which I think was a steal. In our point of view, I think they paid way too much for him. But nice to see that he's still a Premier League player. Gallagher went to Birmingham. Blackburn. They don't even rate him over there. I don't think we got 5 million for that. For him, sorry. Austin, 4 million to West Brom. But then Classy went on a free. Davis went on a free. But then look at all these loans: Lamina, Reed, Carrillo, Elianusi, Forster, Hoyt, Sims, Hesketh. So many players went out on loan, and it's still a problem we're facing now. I mean, we've already seen Elianusi go out on another loan. Hoyt might be sold this week, but what were your thoughts, and is it clear that we still have a massive problem that's going to take a while to sort of solve?
I think so. I think you look at the list of net loans you just listed, like it's really difficult to know what to do with them because a lot of them have got high wages and a few still years on the contracts. But yeah, a lot of the ones that left were never going to be long-term options, like Classy and Gallagher, Target, Bertrand. They never had a Bertrand, so yeah, it made sense for all them to go at the time, I think.
Well, let's briefly go over pre-season. It was 4 wins and a draw against mediocre sides. The only one sort of note was Feyenoord, and we beat them 3-1. I mean, Shea was scoring goals. I think it sold us a bit of a false hope, to be honest. But swiftly moving on to the start of the season, August, we said in our preview for the season that it was a tough start, having Man United and Liverpool as our first two home games. But that first trip to Burnley where we lost 3-0, I mean, what went wrong if you can remember that far back?
He played back three that game. Stevens got hooked after that game, didn't he? But I think it was 0-0 at half time, I think.
It was, yeah. We'd had the better of the first half, I thought.
And then we just sort of let it slip away, didn't we? Yeah, so long I can't remember, but it just seemed like a really bad day.
Well, I've got the goal scorers were Ashley Barnes, who got 2, and Goodmanson, but I've got the minutes. They scored all 3 goals within 12 minutes. That's what that tells you everything. But Angus Gunn was playing back then. Vestergaard was probably our first choice defender back then, which is kind of crazy to think. I know Bedrick had a good one last year, but we were all like disgusted. I remember seeing Jack Stevens in the starting lineup, and sort of what a turnaround it's been. But swiftly we moved on to Liverpool. Much better performance. They'd just beaten Chelsea in the Super Cup. Obviously, European champions as well, gave them a good run for their money. But then that Brighton win, that was the one where I really started to think, God, like we are the team that we want to be. Because I remember us saying, we didn't feel like we were going to push for Europe this season, but we definitely felt like it was going to be an opportunity to enjoy ourselves again as Saints fans after arguably 2.5, 3 torrid seasons. Really poor football, fighting with relegation. Were you, after that Brighton win, were you encouraged? And also after the Man United draw, in fairness, getting 4 points from those first 4 games, were you encouraged by the start?
I was by Brighton, but little caveat, they did have a red card, didn't they, in the first half, so that did help us a little bit. But our record at Brighton is pretty good on the whole in the last few years, or against them generally actually. But I think getting the point against United was a big one because went behind as well. So I think that was a big could have been a big turning point, but obviously we know it didn't turn out like that.
Yeah, no, of course. And in between the Brighton win and the Man United draw, we went to Fulham in the Cup and won 1-0. Got a very tasty draw in the next round of the competition. And we'll talk about that in a bit. But come August, we were mid-table. We picked up a few good points. I think the only game we were disappointed with really was the Burnley one. But going on to September, we've had an international break at this point. And we go to Sheffield United, brand new to the Premier League. They hadn't been, I think it was like their first season back in the top flight for 13, 14 years or something. Of course, in hindsight, we know how good a team they ended up being. But to go there and win 1-0, with a superb goal once again from Moussa Djenepo. What did you take from that? Because for me, in hindsight, made me think we were going to be a top half side and Moussa Djenepo was going to be a world beater. Neither of the two happened.
It was an interesting one. Again, another red card from Billy Sharp. But yeah, I think it was always going to be a tough game up there. But as we've seen, a lot of teams struggled out there. Liverpool scraped past them. I think United drew, Arsenal lost, Tottenham I think lost as well. So you've seen that it's a tough place to go, and everyone expected it to be probably an easy game. But as it's proved, they're a decent team and finished in the top 10. So it was a good win at the time.
We didn't even realise that. I mean, in hindsight, we've actually done the double over them, which is kind of crazy. And we'll obviously talk about yesterday's result towards the end of the video and the podcast. But then, Friday night football against Bournemouth, their trophy. I mean, in hindsight, it didn't mean that much for us. And, their season didn't go as planned. So that's what I need to say about it. We've said plenty about Bournemouth this season. But that was the pre-South Coast derby for some of you. I don't know why you'd call it that still. The real one came a couple of days later, and that was the one we really showed up for, and the one that the fans wanted us to show up for. 4-0 win at Fratton Park. It was. You and I went. It was an interesting night. It was obviously an enjoyable night come the end. One that I'll never forget. But the thing is with that game, regardless of the fact that it was a derby, that's the game where I look back and think, God, that's when we saw that Danny Ings is going to be our striker.
Yeah, 100%. He's right for it as well. Was it Needs line in front of that? Was it Milton End? Is it
Fratton End? Yeah.
And obviously they were quite dominant in the first sort of 10, 15 minutes. They probably should have been ahead, to be honest. And somehow we managed to get a 4-0 win. Of the second half, we were really good and showed the sort of difference in level between the two sides at the moment. And nice to get one over them because we've not won there since it was 30 years or something, 25 years.
It was I think it was 1980 something, I want to say 84, 86, something like that. It'd been a long time, to be fair. But the thing is with this derby is we don't play each other very often, so we can say, we haven't won there for 30 odd years, but how many times have we been there? 5, 6? So and that's one of my probably my favourite away game of this season. That was, it's on the bucket list if you're a Saints fan. It doesn't come around a lot, and there was so much hype leading up to that game, and obviously it paid off, coming away with a massive result. Unfortunately, our League Cup run couldn't continue. We got drawn Man City away, and we don't really need to talk about that one really once it comes around. But then a couple of days later, we go to Tottenham, first trip to the new stadium. That was such a deflating day, if I remember. We equalised. I think did their goal come from a deflection or something? Or that might have been the cup game, I can't remember. It was like gunning goal, Poppadom hands, and obviously Ingsy made the most of a Lloris error to equalise. But then Kane went up, equalised. They had a man sent off for, I think, was it like the 30th minute? We were literally playing against 10 men for an hour, and we couldn't break them down. We were playing 5 at the back. Obviously Ings was now scoring goals. Adams hadn't quite settled in. Why weren't we breaking down teams? Why was Ralph still playing with this back 5?
He seemed really keen just to keep going with it. It took him a while to change to his preferred 4-2-2-2. But I remember rightly said, I think Cedric got injured in the warm up and Vestergaard came in, so that sort of forced his hand a little bit. And we just played a really defensive team, and even with 10 men, them having 10 men, it just sort of we didn't seem to really go for it until the last sort of 10 minutes, and it just didn't make any sort of sense. I didn't really get that.
Well, so we've lost back-to-back Premier League games, Bournemouth and Spurs. Then we go back to St Mary's, make it 3 defeats in a row with a really, really poor performance against Chelsea, regardless of the fact that they were in form, beating everyone away from home under Frank Lampard. Look, Chelsea were in the peak form of the season at the start. Let's be honest. At this point, Mason Mount and Abraham were scoring for fun, but it was just the manner of the defeat. Okay, Ings got another goal, but you can't concede 4 goals to anybody. Of course, we'll see later that you can score. You can concede a lot more than 4 goals at home to another team in the Premier League. Went to Wolves. Good point in hindsight. Actually, if I think about it, I think that's quite an underrated point with Ings. But we had to talk about it. We're going to talk about it now. The 9-0. We were all there. Some of us left. I mean, I'll always say that I stayed. Not that it's like a badge of honour, but it's a memory. It's definitely going to stick with me for, I think, the whole of my life. And I mean, look, I get goosebumps when I think back of that night. It's mentioned so frequently, but when I reflect on this, because we're not going to talk about it again, hopefully, for a while now that the season's over, but is this the game where you think it was the turning point, or do you think everything changed a little bit later on? Because I've heard some people say that the Arsenal draw was the turning point, and we'll get onto that, and the Watford and Norwich wins. But after the 9-0, our form did turn around. Was this the turning point for you, or do you think that there were a few more weeks to come until it actually started kicking in?
I think this was a turning point. It made us sort of wake up and sort of smell the coffee a little bit, because these sort of results, spoke about Chelsea earlier, was definitely one that it could easily happen again. So it made us sort of realise that, geez, we're in real trouble here. If we don't sort it out, we're gonna go down, sort of thing. And obviously after that we had City games we're going to talk about, but those sort of 2 games were massive, and no, we didn't win them, but to be able to react performance-wise was positive, and I think it was a massive turning point despite the result.
Yeah, well, if you think about the starting lineup, just from memory, Gunn was in goal. Of course, that was actually his last Premier League game for us. Valerie started. I remember Danzo coming off the bench. I guess it was. I think it would have been Ings up front. I think by this point Adams had been dropped because of his difficult start at Saints. But let's move on. We don't need to talk about it anymore. After losing a game like in that manner, we have 2 trips to Man City in the space of a couple of days. In fairness, we defended quite well. The cup game, we never looked like winning, but we really battled in the league fixture, taking the lead through Ward-Prowse early on, and held that lead for, I think it was like an hour almost. Like, we did really, really well to hold on to that. Couldn't push for the point. City came from behind to win that 1-2-1, but I remember the next game against Everton when we lost 2-1 at St Mary's. At this point, we hadn't won at home. I think we had 1 point at St Mary's all season, but from this point, to be honest, mate, I remember this one, and I remember hurting more than I did with the Leicester defeat, because Everton was so poor at that point in the season. Obviously, I think this is their lowest finish for 16 years. I heard yesterday. They've had a really poor season, but particularly at this point in the season under Marco Silva, they weren't picking up points. They hadn't won away all season. This is what hurt me. I don't know about you, but this one really sort of hit me, and this is when I remember thinking, we're going down.
Yeah, I was really worried after this one. Again, it was really poor defending, and their record at St Mary's isn't great over the last few years since we've been back in the Premier League as well. It was really worrying. Obviously, November, like you say, mid-November, and it was just, where's the next point going to come from, sort of thing. So it was just really worrying, and I remember thinking this could be the year we go.
Yeah, and I remember just thinking, like, oh, why? Because we all knew Ralph was the best manager we'd had since Koeman. That was fact. But this is when the Ralph out brigade started coming up, and I understand why. Like, don't get me wrong, I understand why people were saying Ralph out, but it was a deeper problem, and obviously we've seen that it was a deeper problem now that we've made a few changes in the team. But next up we went to Arsenal, and at this point again, like Everton, Arsenal are in really poor form. They under Emery, they just looked completely hopeless, and they were hopeless on that day. I mean, how we didn't win by a couple of goals is beyond me, to be honest with you. But for me, when I look back, that's the game where I think that was the turning point. Only because we didn't show up at all against Everton. I know Ings got his goal, customary goal, but we went back to the 4-2-2. I think Armstrong started that one as well, if I remember correctly. And obviously, what a player he's been for us this season since he's come into the side. But yeah, like I said, how it wasn't a win, I don't know. Ings got another goal. Ward-Prowse got a penalty on the rebound. I mean, Gineppo should have scored one or two. Obafemi should have scored, if I remember correctly. Cedric messed up a pass. I mean, the amount of chances we absolutely tore them apart. And that's when we saw the potential of the 4-2-2. I mean, okay, it was against a very poor Arsenal team. But for me, in hindsight, I think that was the turning point. But it doesn't matter, to be honest, because we needed to win the next two games. They were must-wins. Watford and Norwich at home. Watford, bottom of the league, winless. They'd already sacked one manager. After that night, they sacked their second of the season. How big was this one? Do you remember how you were feeling ahead of the game, and obviously how you felt at full time?
Yeah, I was really nervous for this one. It was, especially going behind as well. I think Sarr scored after, I think it was a throw-in over the top, and to come from behind, it's just something we don't do that often. And the free kick from, it was Prowse, wasn't it? And Gineppo, obviously a bit of, I think it went out of play, but VAR didn't pick it up on it. And it's a bit of karma from a few years ago, so we all know about what happened a few years ago. And yeah, it was just nice to finally get a win at home. I think it was one of the first ones of the season, so yeah, it was good.
Yeah, it was. And then I remember the Norwich game as one of our best first halves of the season, in fairness. We could have gone in 3-0 up, 2-0 up. Pukki scored, made it squeaky bum time, but we held on to get the 3 points. Norwich at that point, they picked up that massive win against City, but then they lost at home to Villa 5-1. They were looking like the side that eventually went down by 10, 11 points, whatever it was in the end. Went to Newcastle, lost 2-1. That was disappointing, especially taking the lead in that one and losing so late. Lost to West Ham 1-0. That was another one where after picking up 7 really good points in 3 games, we go and lose 2 games that were again winnable. And I remember thinking we're not getting anything from this season. I still remember after that West Ham game thinking, God, we are going down. And maybe that was a bit naive, but the way we were playing at times, the way we looked so toothless at home, I was like, there is no way we can get the points that we need. But from there on, mate, it's pretty rosy, to be honest, in terms of results and the rest of the season. So we've done the bad part, and now we can enjoy the better, not even half, just over half of the season. Start off with, we went to Villa just before Christmas, got a 3-1 win there. Ings brazed possibly his best performance of the season, if I remember. He didn't get many braces. He scored in a lot of games, but he didn't get many braces. Jack Stevens got his goal as well, and that was when Jack had been put back into the team and was looking excellent, in fairness to him. And obviously finished off very excellently. Chelsea, a couple of days later on Boxing Day, that's one of my favourite away days as well. I didn't go, but in terms of the results we picked up, Redmond's tucking it in after a fantastic team move. How excited were you about what we could do? Because within a couple of games, we turned it around.
Very excited, yeah, especially winning Chelsea, which is very tough usually, and they were having a good season at this point. So I think that was quite a big statement to win that, to follow up the Villa game, to be going into Christmas and New Year on a high, and a real possibility of being able to get out of danger was a real positive, because it didn't look like it before that.
And then with the Christmas schedule in the Premier League, you've got games coming thick and fast. A couple of days later, I think it was just 2. We had Palace at St Mary's. Good point there, actually. Another Ings goal, and we'll obviously talk about Ings in the player ratings part of the podcast. But then we go into the new year, New Year's Day, get off to a bang. Saints beat Spurs at home. I mean, Tottenham didn't really offer much. Under Mourinho, they weren't really offering much anyway. They'd had a difficult season. But it got off, 2020 got off to the best possible start. It may not have been the best year, but it's definitely got off to the best possible start. Ings scoring my favourite goal of his this season, the little dink over Alderweireld to put it into the back of the net. And defensively, we look solid. I remember Spurs didn't really have much of a sniff. I think Kane had a shot early on, and then obviously put the ball in the back of the net, pulled his hamstring. He was offside, but they didn't really have much that day. beat Huddersfield in the cup, and then I think probably my favourite away game in the league this season, beating Leicester 2-1, redemption day, and we were so dominant that day as well. What are your recollections, your memories of that one?
Yeah, I think we went behind as well in that game and we came back. Adams played through innings after Armstrong had got it back to level. I think they scored late on, but it was disallowed for offside, so that was quite fortunate. But to win after what had happened earlier in the season was just massive. And Leicester fans can go on about the 9-0, but at the end of the day, they got 3 points off us. We got 3 points off them. It's exactly the same. Exactly the same.
Yeah, no, you're right, mate. And yeah, having a late winner from Ings where he took his shirt off, it felt so good. It felt so good. And then we had Wolves at home. At this point, we were on the cusp of climbing into a Europa League place, if I remember correctly. Like we were on the brink of the top half, on the brink of seventh, which is just mental. Unfortunately, we didn't win this one. I think. I think if I look back on how I felt, I wasn't too deflated. Obviously, when you lose a 2-goal lead at half time to lose the game 3-2 at home, especially against any side, it's deflating. But I remember, given the fact that we'd had such a good turnaround over the festive period, it wasn't that big a deal that we were losing at home to Wolves. Wolves were in fantastic form at that point, and pushing for the Champions League places, whereas we were just happy to be in the mix for a top half finish, which a month before we looked like we were going to be in the bottom three. So we don't need to talk about that one. Longo's first goal of the season, if I remember correctly. Bednarek scored as well, but a bit of a capitulation in that second half. But you went to this one, Palace win away from home, beat them 2-0, and that did put us in the top half. I remember this one. Obviously, Redmond scored a great goal, but this was the game where I really thought, Jesus, like Armstrong's a quality player here.
Yeah, it was a great game. It was Armstrong and Redmond both got great goals. It was much needed response after the Wolves game because we could have easily folded and been back to our old self. So I think it was on Tuesday night, so it was quick after the sort of Wolves game. So to win after that was really positive and only boded well for the rest of the season.
Yeah, well then we're back at home against Tottenham a couple of weeks after beating them 1-0. We get a 1-1 draw, deserved. I don't think we did enough to win it, but Boufal scored a late equaliser, which, like I said, definitely deserved. And from my personal experience, it's probably best home limbs of the season. I was just happy to see Boufal score. Then we move into February. Battered in the second half at Anfield after a really strong first half against the eventual Premier League champions. We don't need to talk about that one too much. And then we have our replay at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, which was a game I remember everyone being really excited for. I think we got an allocation of 8,000 or 9,000 away tickets. That was one that every Saints fan was looking forward to. Obviously, for some, their first trip to this new stadium. But we just fell short in the end after coming from behind to lead with, I don't know, that might be my favourite goal of the season, to be fair. Redmond running pretty much the entire length of the pitch, laying it off to Ings, and Ings, he had so much work to do as well, and then, the man in form puts it in the bottom corner past Lloris, but that, I wouldn't say capitulation, I don't think that's fair, but the way it ended wasn't ideal. Son dived, let's be honest, Son dived for a penalty, VAR wasn't there to rectify that, and we go out of the cup, and, in hindsight, we had a pretty good run for the semi-final if we'd won that, because we would have got Norwich at home. Obviously, they beat Spurs, and then we would have got Man United, which is always winnable. At home, we could have gone to the semi-final, but maybe next year we'll have a cup run. But back to league, and at this point, no cup. The season's looking a bit dire. I remember thinking this is going to be a bit stale now. We're not going to get top half, or I didn't think we'd get top half. But I didn't feel like there was any more relegation threat. Lose at home to Burnley, really poor game that. I remember Vestergaard playing and having a disaster class. Weather was awful, it was such a Burnley day. But then another home game a week later against Aston Villa. For me, the worst team who have come to St Mary's this season. I mean, fair enough they've stayed up, but they were just absolutely dreadful. Against us away, at Villa Park as well, back at Christmas time. But on that day, easily we should have won by more. They were so dreadful.
They were awful, yeah. I don't know how we didn't win by more, but it's nice to clinch it at the end. And I think it was Armstrong on it with the, well, not tapping, but the score from the edge of the box. And it was nice just to I know we weren't in that much trouble at that time, but to get one over sort of a team near the bottom, because we haven't done that too much in the last few years.
Yeah, no, 100%. Well, here's a fun stat for you. We'll talk about it now. Now that we're talking about Villa, this is the first time ever the Saints have picked up maximum points against all promoted sides. We've done the double over Sheffield United, Norwich, and Villa. So there's a fun stat for you. Moving on to West Ham, our curse at the London Stadium continues. At least we scored this time after conceding 3 goals against West Ham. Oh my God, I don't want to go there ever again. Obafemi got a goal in that one. I think that was his 3rd goal of the season at that point. And we'll talk about him in the player review, but he's actually quietly had quite a good season. And then Newcastle at home, that was a tricky game. That was a really tricky one. I think the Djenepo red card didn't help. They could have scored early on. McCarthy's probably his best football match in his Southampton shirt, but we don't need to talk about that one much because we then have a massive break. But just before the restart and obviously lockdown and everything, what were your feelings about Saints and the season that they'd had at that point from restart? And did you think that we were ever going to restart the league?
God, admit, I didn't think we'd restart. It just didn't seem likely, and how it would possibly work. Worry for me was like with testing kits and stuff like that. How would they do it without taking it away from people who generally need it? But to get it back was huge for the morale of the country more than anything. Like, I know football's not that important in the grand scheme of things compared to what's going on, but to get it back was huge, and I was just glad that we could show everyone how good we were towards the end of the season.
Yeah, no, 100%. Well, going into the restart, we were 14th after 29 games. We looked virtually safe and were looking up the table in fairness. And we'd had a few dodgy results towards the end. I think we'd lost 4 and 5. But in hindsight, though, we said that we thought Saints would do well with no crowds when we previewed the restart. And to be fair, we were spot on. You know, we've been excellent. But to start off, it was a pretty comfortable win in the end against Norwich. Poor start from us. I mean, Norwich probably should have gone 1-0 up. Shaky start. But they needed the points. You know, they had to go for it. That was the first chance and the only chance really that they were going to get to survive. If they'd lost that, they wouldn't have had another opportunity. And obviously we've seen that they've lost all their games since the restart because of that. But yeah, that second half from us we were sublime, you know. And it was great to see the forward 3. I know Obafemi started next to Ings, but the main 3 in that forward line, Ings, Armstrong, and Redmond getting their goals that day. Could have been more in the end, but I think for me that one we sort of highlighted that Jan Valerie's just not it, and we saw that in the Arsenal game later on. A week later, lost 2-0 to Arsenal after a poor restart from them. I remember being disappointed with that, but in the grand scheme of things, it didn't really matter, to be fair. But then Watford, you know, obviously we've been doing some of the live streams together. That Watford win, was that your? Do you think that was the best performance of the restart?
I think it probably was. Yeah, overall, the whole game it seemed we were just dominant, and I know they got back to 2-1 at one point, but I never once feared that they would get anything off us because they just looked diabolical, and us on the counter attack just looked unstoppable, and to seal it with it was a Prowsey free kick, wasn't it? So it was really good to just get the win, and I'm not a massive fan of Watford after what happened a few years ago to Corey, so it was quite nice to see them go down, to be honest.
Yeah, and Ings got a brace again. Maybe that game was his best of the season. But we move into July. I mean, this is crazy. We move into July, and we have City at home, and we think, oh God, this could be a cricket score. Regardless of the fact that we, you know, picked up 2 great wins against, let's be honest, sides that got relegated in the end. But for me, best home game of the season, and we weren't even able to watch. It's just typical. That, you know, Adams got his goal finally after coming on against Watford and looking really strong. Got his start and took his opportunity. But what a goal! Was that your goal of the season?
Yeah, I think it probably is, to be honest. I just imagine what it'd be like to be there for that goal. Like, it would just be incredible. But I'm trying to think. Yeah, I think it probably would be. Maybe Redmond's at Chelsea would come close, but they're probably the top 2, I'd say.
See, I'm more of a Djenepo against Sheffield United man myself, but we'll do our awards later on. But yeah, so Shea gets his goal, and defensively we just looked sublime. City showed up. That's the other thing. City showed up that day. You know, people who didn't watch the game can look at the result and think, oh, it was another poor game from City. They were actually very good. They were on form, but we just defended very well. A couple of days later, with this busy schedule with the restart, we go up to Everton. probably the biggest game of the season at that point. If we'd won that, top half would have been a real possibility. Unfortunately, we didn't. After we have to be breaking down teams and scoring more goals when we're on top. That's something that we need to take into next season, in my opinion, because we were so dominant in that first half. Ings got his goal, had a few other chances. Prowsey had a penalty that he missed. And then ultimately we walked away with a point thinking, God, how have we not won this game? We've seen since that game how drab Everton have been. How poor their flip-flops have been on. They've been on the beach. They were so poor. But then probably my favourite game of the restart, actually. I know we beat City, but probably my favourite game of the restart next. We go up to Man United, and at that point, regardless of the fact that we've just played City, they are the best team in the league at that point. On a massive unbeaten run, won loads of games. I think they'd only dropped 2 points or restart. They were looking like a really fierce opposition, and they were the league's informed side. But we went there and got a great point in literally the 96th minute. I mean, it doesn't really get much better than that.
No, it doesn't. We've got a bit of a history of scoring late goals at Old Trafford in the last few years. Tadix a few years ago, Austin's as well. But yeah, it was really nice just to get a point because our away record this season has been phenomenal. It's just, I don't know where it's come from, to be honest, but to get a draw at Old Trafford was just ridiculous after the effort we put in at Everton. So I was really pleased to get a point, especially as I know we got top 4 in the end, but it dented United top 4 hopes at the time.
Yeah, but I think what I took away from that was the fact that obviously, okay, we took the lead, they came from behind and took the lead and could have scored more in that first half. But as the second half went on, they looked more drowsy and we looked fitter. That's the thing. I say on a limb that we are the fittest side, if not one of the fittest sides in the league, in the Premier League. But then this one gets away from me a little bit. This one was quite an irrelevant result, to be honest. We drew 1-1 with Brighton. I mean, first half was awful, but you have to expect that with 5 changes. Jake Vokins made his Premier League debut. I thought he looked quite good, to be fair. And some people saying he's not ready. I think he is, to be honest, to be back up to Bertrand. We've seen a couple times that Bertrand can have a niggle here and there. I think he's ready, to be honest. But it was an uneventful game. Ings got another goal, 20th actually in the league. Our unbeaten run continued. And then we went to Bournemouth. This is one where I really feel like if the fans were in the stadium, it would have been a really tasty affair. We looked at this one, I think, even way back in January, February time, thinking, God, this is the day we're going to relegate Bournemouth. For the fans that, were keen on doing that, couldn't actually relegate them on the day. They still had a chance, even if they'd lost. But another strong away performance, where we're scoring our goals and looking pretty solid at the back. Great finish from Ingsy. Shea got his goal. How happy were you to win that one?
It was really nice, especially after the way they reacted after the game earlier in the season. It was nice just to put them in their place a little bit and sort of shut them up. And I know they weren't down by that point, but obviously we know what happened now, and it's quite nice just to see them go down back to where they belong, because they seem to think that the South Coast is theirs, but it clearly isn't anymore. So it's good to see that they won't be around anymore.
Do you like having another South Coast team in the league? This is just a side note. We're going to go off on a tangent a little bit, because obviously for the last couple of seasons we've had 3 South Coast sides. Obviously now it's just us and Brighton. We don't have a rivalry. They know that they've got Palace, we've got Skates. But do you like having another South Coast team in the league?
Brighton I'm completely fine with, but Bournemouth, their fans seem to think that we're rivals. I don't like that at all, and they just seem to always big us up and think they're better than us. So I don't like it when they're in the league, so, mainly because they're fans. But obviously it's a close away game, so that's one of the negative parts about it. But yeah, Brighton's fine, but Bournemouth I'm not too fussed on.
Yeah, no, I echo your thoughts there. And then to wrap it up, our massive win yesterday, I was really impressed with our second half. Even in the first half we looked okay at times. It was just Sheffield United were so resolute at the back, but again, our fitness showed. They took the lead through Lundstrom, really poor from Vestergaard, and we'll talk about him. But come second half, we showed up. Adams up front. I mean, what a monster he's looking to be now. He's finally the striker that we paid £15 million for. I think he was lucky, to be honest. I'll be honest with his first goal. I think Henderson should have done better at his near post, but I think in that position it looked like Adams was either going to take another touch or try and shoot across the goalkeeper. He took it quickly straight for the near post and it went in, which was obviously fair play to him, and it was good to get it early on. I think he gets another goal on the rebound to turn it around, and then we get our penalty. Ingsy puts that one away finally after missing one last week. That was pretty dreadful for his standards. But a 3-1 win against Sheffield United is a big result to boast about. But I don't know, I was just frustrated watching it. How he just didn't give Ings the ball at all. He was only one goal away from the Golden Boot. And let's be honest, Sheffield United were looking leggy. He could have scored.
Yeah, he could have. And obviously, looking back, the missed penalties cost him the chance of sharing it with Vardy. And yeah, it's frustrating, but obviously no one expected him to even close to challenging for the Golden Boot and to be that like head of the likes of Salah, Aubameyang, Kane, Mane. Like it's just mental, really. And he's had an unreal season. I'm sure we'll talk about it later on.
Yeah, we will. 100%. Well, that is it in terms of looking back at the matches. We have finished 11th, 52 points. Ironically, a -9 goal difference, which is actually quite funny. But I went back and watched our pre-season preview, which obviously we filmed almost a year ago now, which is just crazy to think. But I predicted that we were going to finish 9th. I was very confident for the season. I wasn't that far off it actually in the end. Only I think we're 2 or 3 points or 4 off 9th in the end. You predicted 12th, so in fairness, you weren't far away at all. Liam predicted 10th, and we didn't get Josh on that one, so I didn't get his prediction. But I think he was quite confident as well. I think he probably would have predicted about 9th or 10th as well. But in fairness, at one point in the season it looked like we were way off. But come the end, we're very close.
Yeah, very good. A few months ago, I would have laughed at you if you said we'd finished anywhere near the top 10, but to finish, we said 2 points off 9th, I think it is, or 4 points off 8th as well. Just a couple of results and could have been an outside chance of the Europa League. So it's been a hell of a season, and hopefully it's not quite this roller coaster ride like it is most seasons next year. I think we should be strong throughout.
Yeah, well, let's move on to our end of season awards. I've made my picks. Didn't get the chance to converse with you in fairness, but we've already discussed it. Goal of the season, I'm going to go with Gineppo against Sheffield United. You're going to go with Adams against City then?
Adams against City, I think, yeah. I think so, yeah.
And then top 3 players of the season, because of course we know who our player of the season is. I've gone with Ings, Armstrong and Bednarek.
It's a good shout, yeah. I think definitely Ings. I think Armstrong's been good, yeah. Ings, Armstrong and Bertrand. I think he's had a really good end to the season, so I'm going to give it Bertrand.
I'm going to change mine actually. Instead of Bednarek, I'm going to put Stevens, because the turnaround that he's made this season is just ridiculous. Fair play to him. My top 3 games were City 1-0. I think that was probably my favourite game of the season, beating them, because that's a big deal. Going to Chelsea and winning. Actually, no, I'm going to change that. I'm going to go Leicester away, winning there, and then the Pompey 4-0 win in the Cup. They're my top 3.
Mine would be Pompey winning the Cup, the City 1-0, very similar, and I think Spurs at home for me, 1-0.
And then, not necessarily the top and the favourite games, but most significant games. For me, it has to be the 9-0. We can't ignore that. Arguably the 2-2 against Arsenal instead of that, because it is just about turning point, I guess. But obviously we just said, that 9-0, let's be honest, it was a turning point. But I've also put the 2-1 win against Leicester. That was a big turning point. That, to me, that game proved that we were a very good team again, and that we were able to rectify the wrongs of the first half of the season. To go there against what was one of the league's best sides. I know it hasn't ended the way they wanted it, but Leicester have been an absolute joy to watch before the restart, and it was a big result for us. And again, the City 1-0, because that proved to me that we could defend, we could stick together as a team, and they wanted to play for Ralph. We look like a compact team. We talk about Sheffield United, and one of the big reasons they've done so well this season is they've stuck together. They know each other well. They've gone up through the leagues with each other. Okay, a few signings here and there when they've gone up to the Premier League and when they came up from League One to the Championship a couple of years ago. But for whole in whole, they've stuck together. They know each other, and that's what we've got next season. I don't feel like we need that many signings, but I've rambled on. What are your most significant 3 games?
Yeah, I agree. The Leicester 2-1 and 9-0, both of them. I think they're both sort of big turning points, and I'd almost say like the Newcastle one, because obviously we had a bit of a break after that, but the form after restart was incredible. So I think that was a little bit. I know there was a bit of a gap between the games, but that was a little bit of a turning point.
You think it was a bit of the kick in the backside that they needed after a bit of poor form?
Yeah, it was, because I know we were near enough safe when we came back, but to play the way we did for all 7 games, we saw teams like Palace and Everton just not bother really. To keep going the whole way to the end of the season I think it's really good and does some good.
Well, to finish up, we are going to look at the players, give them a review, give them a rating, and let's get straight into it, I guess. Starting off with the goalkeepers, Alex McCarthy. I'm going to give him a 7. I think he's actually had a very good season, quite possibly his best in a Saints shirt. We're still waiting for a season where he's first choice for the entirety of the season. It's unfair on him. I think what happens at the start, Gunn, in fairness, looked okay last season. It's just the start for him, and we'll talk about him next. But what would you rate Alex McCarthy out of 10 this season?
I agree, 7. I think he had a penalty save in against Newcastle. Had a couple of shaky moments, but most keepers have that. So I think 7's fair. Since he's come into the team, we've been a lot better. So I think 7's fair.
And then Angus Gunn. I mean, I still think there's a goalkeeper there, to be honest with you. I still think there's a player that we can have at Saints. But for me, a 2 or a 3. He started off with a couple clean sheets, and a few good saves. But oh my god, when you can't let 9 goals in one game. He was so short of confidence, and I don't know. What do you think? Am I being harsh? Do you think?
I agree with you. I think 2 as at max. Even at the start, even before the Leicester game, he wasn't great, and then occasional games came for the cup and that he wasn't brilliant. So I think 2 or 3 is about right.
Right, let's move on to the defenders then. Starting with Vestergaard. I mean, potentially I could give him a 5, but I think that'd be quite kind. I'm going to give him a 4. In fairness, he has had a few good games, but on the whole, he's just hopeless sometimes. Outpaced all this. He got outpaced by Billy Sharp yesterday. I mean, that tells you everything. Give me your rating for him, and also, do you think he needs to be sold in the summer?
Probably a 3. He's had a couple of good games, but overall he's not been great. Spoke about the Burnley game earlier. It's just been not great. I think he probably will be sold. Obviously, Saliso is probably going to come in quite soon, so I think he'll be on his way along with a few others. I think he'll be gone, yeah.
And then Kevin Danzo, it's been a weird one for him actually. Hasn't really had an opportunity, in my opinion, but I have to give him a 2 or a 3. He's hardly played, and when he's played, he's looked okay, but sometimes out of position, he's looked quite hopeless, to be honest.
He's not played much at all. Has he played all right at Fulham, if I remember rightly, but that was a championship team, so I think 3. He's been played out of position, so it's really hard to judge him on too much.
And then going on to the more first choice centre backs, Jack Stevens. Start with him. I'm going to give him an 8. I think the fact that he hasn't played the entire season, and 1 or 2 mistakes, maybe a 9, but I think an 8's a pretty solid rating for him.
Very similar. I'd probably say 7.5, 8. Yeah, it's quite a remarkable turnaround, really, given that he played the Burnley game and then was out of the team for months, really. Came in after the Leicester game and has not looked back since, and even had a few goals. So I think he's well deserved his rating of 7 or 8. Yeah.
And then we go to Bednarek. I'd probably give him a 7. I think just because I think Stevens has just had the better season. But again, Bednarek's looking like a real good prospect. Valerie, I'll give a 3. He's a bit woeful, to be honest. It's a shame because I really liked him last season, but he's just shown, he's had a few injury issues, abdominal problem. I think he's been out for a while, but he's just not it, is he?
No, he did really well last year. A couple of goals at United and against Spurs as well, but this year he's just not been the same. And when Cedric left, it was a chance to really kick on with Walker Peters coming in, but he's not been great, so probably a 2 or 3.
Well, you talk about that man, Carl Walker-Peters. I don't think you can give him any higher than a 7, even though I'd like to, because he's really only played during this restart. But let's talk about him. It's a pretty obvious question, to be honest, but should we sign him on a permanent deal?
100%, yeah. I think we should do everything we can to sign him. Even if it takes a bit more money than you might want to pay, I think we should go for it. He suits the system. He likes playing there. Even yesterday, I think his tweet gave an indication that he might be here next year. So I think we've definitely got to do everything we can to keep him.
And then on to left backs, Jake Vokins. I can't really give him a rating, to be honest. I'm going to leave that as NA. But like we said, I think he's definitely someone that can now push Bertrand. I think he's ready. But let's talk about Bertrand. I'm going to give him, I don't know if an 8 is a bit generous. I'm going to give him a 7. He's had another great season for Saints. And I get a bit annoyed, to be honest, because I see a lot of criticism every now and then from him, from Saints fans on Twitter and that, saying that he's lazy, that he's half-arsed. Do you agree with all of that? Because he's almost a club legend. His service has been great.
I bet you know he's my top three player this season. I think he's been brilliant since he's come back into the side after a very weird start to the season. Obviously, fell out with Ralph and stuff, but yeah, since he's come back into the side, he's been brilliant, and we need to tie him down to a new deal. So I think it expires next year. So yeah, definitely been a great player.
Going on to midfielders, starting off with Romeu, in and out of the team. He's been in since the restart because of the Højbjerg situation. I think he was starting quite regularly actually at the start and was looking quite good. I want to give him a 6, but he hasn't played as much. I'll give him a 5. I think he's looked good during the restart, but there are times where he gets brought on as a substitute and he just slows down the play, and we don't look like we're ever going to score a goal again.
Yeah, I agree. I think five's fair. He's since restarted one of our better players, and before that he was a bit hit and miss. But obviously that's because he wasn't playing too much. Like I say, coming on the sub. So I think five's fair.
Now on to Ward Prowse. He has missed only 50 minutes of action all season in all competitions. I mean, that effort alone deserves a 10, but I'm going to give him an 8. Now, a couple of assists, a couple of goals is what you expect now from Ward Prowse, but what we've seen Hasenhüttl do to him is absolutely incredible. I know he scored more goals last season, but he's just such a physical presence now, and now he's captain Prowsey, and if reports be believed, he's about to sign a 5-year contract. Do you think that's a good move from the club, and how do you rate his season?
Great move. I think it's needed to be done, especially if Højbjerg looking nice on the go. I think making him captain was a big move, a bold move as well at the time. But I think he's massive, and I think this season's been really good. Like I say, missing 50 minutes. And it was at Spurs game, cup game. Other than that, he's played every single minute. It's just crazy, really. But yeah, great season.
Then on to Højbjerg, whose departure is imminent. Whether that's going to be Spurs or Everton, we'll have to find out. I'm yo-yoing between a 5 and a 6 for him. To be honest, I think I'll be generous and give him a 6. But based on what he did last season, he's had a really poor campaign, in my opinion.
Yeah, he had a couple of good moments at the start, but yeah, he's not been the same at this season. I think since the restart as well, especially he's looked like he's not that bothered and that interested. So I won't be too sad to see him go. Obviously, he's been a good servant, but we've got options that we can bring in if needed. He's not irreplaceable like some players.
And then on to Musa Djenepo, his first season in a Saints shirt, still just 21, or 20. He's just turned 22, hasn't he? Really disappointing with injuries, actually. He's such a young lad, and he's missed the entirety of the restart with some niggling injuries, which isn't ideal, to be honest. He needs to work on that. 2 goals on his day. He looks like dynamite, but sometimes he's lacking a little bit. I want to give him a 5, but I think maybe it's going to have to be a 4. He hasn't played that much. He hasn't played as much as we would have liked. But I think certainly next season we're going to have a real good player there.
Yeah, he's had a couple of good moments, but on the whole, it's been very frustrating. Obviously, the red card as well against Newcastle, which obviously was a bit in the air. But yeah, to miss the whole of the end of the season is a bit annoying. And yeah, I hope 4 or 5's fair.
And on to Stuart Armstrong, probably after Ings, my favourite player in the squad at the moment. I might go out on a limb and give him a really, really generous 9. Because I think what he's done, he came into the side when we were down and out. And a big part of our upturn in form is, his introduction into the team.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, look at the goals. Some of the goals he scored: Palace, Norwich, as well. It's Leicester. It's just been his song that Southgate gave him does ring true. He does score belters. Like he's a great player, and one which we need to try and tie down if we can.
I think after Ings, he's our second top scorer with about 5 or 6. I think it's 5 goals he scored. Then finishing off with midfielders, we've got Boufal. Don't need to talk about him much. I'm going to give him a 4, I think. To be honest, I wouldn't be surprised if he's sold. Redmond, I think I'll give Redmond a 7. Not his best Saints season. I think last season he was better. But it's clearly one of the best players in the team, right?
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, he missed a little bit of the season as well. I think since restart, I know we haven't got too many goals or assists, but we played a lot better with him in the side. So I think definitely, 7's fair.
Will Smallbone, again with Vokins, I don't really want to give him a rating because he's so young and sort of just come into the team as a youngster. I mean, I won't give him a rating, but I think he's definitely one for the future. And I think, after the Sheffield United performance yesterday off the bench, he could probably be a decent replacement for Armstrong if Armstrong's ever injured. I mean, he's not naturally a right-sided player, but he's versatile. I'll give him that, and he's looking like a decent midfielder.
Yeah, he looks good for the future. Definitely, he's got a few starts in there as well. I think he's a good player, and yeah, you can't really rate him because he hasn't played a huge amount of games, but obviously he scored in his debut in the cup as well, so that was nice.
Yeah, well then finishing off with the strikers, Shane Long, he's signed a new 2-year contract. I reckon I'll give him a 5. I think 3 or 4 goals come the end of the season. It's not been a bad long season, but we're picking up a pattern now. He scores his first, or he's used this, sorry, in the first half of the season, scores his first in the second, finishes off on 4 or 5 goals. I mean, do you think it was fair to give him a 2-year contract?
I think so, yeah, just because to have him around in the dressing room, experienced striker for the likes of Adams and Obafemi Turnoff, but he's not a long-term option, but off the bench for 20 minutes or whatever, he could be a good option. So I think, yeah, it was fair enough to give him a new deal.
Shea Adams, new signing for us this season. Took him a while to get off the mark, but he's finished with 4 goals, which I don't think anyone would have imagined. But he's finished the season in red hot form. And do you think now he's the striker that we thought he was going to be, and the one that we're going to partner with next to Ings next season?
I think he has to partner with Ings next season. Obviously, 4 goals isn't a great turnout, but given where he started in the restart, to get 4 goals in the last 4 or 5 games is really good and bodes well for the future. I think there's definitely a player in there, and if we can get Ings and Adams both getting 10 plus, 15 plus goals next season, we'll be laughing.
I forgot to give him a rating. I'm going to give him a 6. I think that might be a bit generous, but I'll give him a 6. His hold-up play is looking good as well. Obafemi, I'm going to give a 5. Very young player still. But to be fair, 4 goals, I think he's done well.
He scored a few key goals, a lot of key away goals as well. Chelsea, Fulham, West Ham. He loves London for some reason. He loves scoring in London.
Then to finish off, our player of the season, I don't even need to ask you what you're going to rate him. It's a 10 for Danny Ings, of course. 25 goals in all competitions. It's an unreal season that he's had. What do you think it's come down to? What's made him the player that he is, do you think, this season?
I think it's the back end of last season, in pre-season, he worked incredibly hard. I've followed him on Instagram, and he's got a personal trainer and stuff. He really worked hard last year. Didn't really have a holiday or anything like that compared to most of the other players. Something similar to what Redmond did the year before. I think that's played a big part in it, being fit the whole season, because undoubtedly there was quality there. That's why Liverpool signed him from Burnley a few years ago. So I think, yeah, that's part of the reason as well. And this season we're playing a lot more attacking, and the system just suits him. So I think that's the main reason why he's done quite so well as he has.
Right, on to questions now. We asked you guys on Twitter and Instagram to ask us some questions about the channel, the podcast, and mainly the season just gone. Starting off with our Twitter questions at DSB Media, or at the DSB Media, sorry. Who do you think will be the most improved player by the end of next season, and how many goals do you think Ings and Adams will get? I'll give you that one, mate.
Ings will get, I don't think he'll get as many as this year, but I think he'll get 15. Adams, if he stays fit, probably 10. Most improved player, that's really tough. Probably go for someone like Smallbone, just because he's probably going to play a bit more next year. But it's hard to really say most improved for next year.
I'm going to answer that one as well. I'm going to say Gineppo is going to be our most improved player. Matt, friend of the channel at Maidman, asks, favourite and least favourite moment of this season. I'll answer that. Favourite, I mean, probably yesterday, to be honest. I mean, maybe the Derby win, but yesterday, just to round everything off, where we've come, it was a big deal, and it was I was so happy for the boys. There've been loads of wins, really good moments. I'm yo-yoing between Leicester, between the Skates winning the Derby. I'll go with the Derby win. I'll stick with the Derby win. At Leo Futcher asks favourite goal and best goal this season. We've kind of gone over that one, so I think his question's answered. And if you don't feel it is Leo, mate, DMS by all means. Courtney asks, if you could give one piece of advice to a young player, what would it be? I mean, I'll answer this one, and not that I'm a coach or anything, but I would just say put the ball in the bloody back of the net, really, to be honest with you, Courtney. Onto Instagram. This is a good one, actually. Who's your ideal PEH replacement? Time to say goodbye to Buffel. Oh, that was 2 questions. Harvey's been cheeky there, but at harvey.wh17. So we'll stick with that one. Who's your ideal PEH replacement?
It's a difficult one, isn't it? I'd look at maybe one of the relegated teams, someone like maybe Lerma or
Decore for me.
Because you're not going to get someone from the Premier League still. So someone's gone down that's wanted to play Premier League. Yeah, Decore could be a great shout as well.
At Kent, oh, sorry mate, I can't really pronounce your name, but best defender this season for Saints. For me, I'm going to go Jack Stevens.
Yeah, that's fair. I think Stevens, Bertrand, Bednarak have all been really good. I said Bertrand earlier, but there's not much between them, I think.
Interesting question, actually, that kind of ties in with our one about Højbjerg. At daily.saintsfc asked, out of the 3 relegated teams, what player would you like to sign for Southampton? I mean, I think Lerm is a good shout, but for me, I've always liked Decore. I know with his handball, but I think he'd be a good little coup for us because we do need a midfielder. Billing as well. There are a couple, to be fair. I think this is probably the best group of players relegated. I'll stick with my original Decore.
A few good ones in Norwich as well. There's a couple of fullbacks, Campbell, Jamal Lewis. But yeah, Bournemouth have got a few, Callum Wilson, but we don't really need a striker, to be honest. So I think any midfielders.
Oh, this is another good one from daily.saintsfc again. Do you think Harrison Reed is good enough to take the PEH role?
I don't think he's good enough to start, maybe, but I think definitely in the squad. Some of his performances for Fulham this year have been really good. And I think he can definitely be in the squad and on the bench most weeks.
Right, that is it. Thank you everyone who sent in questions. Sorry we didn't get around to answering them all. As you can imagine, we're a bit tight on time. We wanted to keep this under an hour, but thank you so much for your support this season. It has been incredible. It's been a really enjoyable season making content for you guys, and the content will not stop by any stretch of the imagination. Hopefully there's some transfer rumours, but more end of season content coming out over the rest of the week. And obviously we're going to be looking ahead to the brand new season, which hopefully is very exciting. Thank you to Tom for joining me. And make sure you've hit the subscribe button if you're watching on YouTube. If you're listening to the podcast, make sure you go over to our channel and subscribe. Lots of content, as I said. Turn on the notifications, follow us on our socials, and we'll see you very soon for another video.